Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 197 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. It's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have the full crew here today. First off, the owner of MTG Goldfish, Richard. How's it going today, Richard?
Tired after waking up early 3 days in a row, Seth, but I'm here.
It was only 6 a.m.
6
It wasn't that early.
Not everyone's like you, Seth. We don't wake up that early.
Yes, it was a long but pretty interesting Pro Tour weekend, and that's going to be one of our big topics for the day. But first, we have Chris Van Meter back. How's it going, Chris? We've missed you the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be back. I've had just a whirlwind of crappy Mondays, which is when we record, between doctor's appointments and dentist appointments, and I have a bunch of holiday stuff that I'm working on here at work at Card Kingdom, and there's just been a few Mondays that I have had deadlines to meet and haven't been able to be on the cast, but my teeth are still there, I'm still alive, and I'm all caught up on all my projects and ready to chat about this Pro Tour.
Yes. So, that is our big topic for today. Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica happened over the weekend. So tons of standard stuff, Pro Tour coverage stuff, just all things Pro Tour is going to be a big chunk of the cast. Then we have a couple of other topics we might get into briefly. There was a Magic Online announcement today that was pretty interesting. Also, maybe some Ultimate Masters talk. That'll really be next week when we get the full spoiler and we'll know more about it. But there's some interesting stuff with box prices that we'll get to if we have time. And then, of course, fish mail, like usual, to wrap things up. So before we jump into it, a quick reminder that today's show is brought to you by spikesacademy.com, which is the world's first Magic the Gathering e-learning academy. They have some sweet online courses created by great players like Paulo Vitor Damarosa and Reed Duke. So check them out at spikesacademy.com. You can even get 10% off if you use the coupon code GOLDFISH. So check them out. Thank you to them for their support. You can learn more at spikes_academy on Twitter. And with our sponsorship stuff out of the way, let's jump right into it, starting with Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. So we're going to jump into all kinds of in-depth stuff about the decks and the format, but what was your just like overall reaction to this Pro Tour? I'm assuming both of you watched at least some of it. What's your first gut reaction to Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica?
It was a very interesting Pro Tour. So one of the things I noticed was viewership on Twitch was at an all-time high. I think we were around 40,000 viewers throughout the Pro Tour, which I think is the highest for standard. And then in the finals, we crested like 45,000-ish. And that's big news, especially since there was the Artifact Preview Tournament happening at the same time, too. So Magic was holding its own. We had a lot of, I'm going to assume, new players. And I'm guessing this is from the push that we've been doing with Arena. So all these new Arena players are tuning in to see Magic played at the highest level. So that was cool. In terms of the tournament itself, day 1 and day 2 were a bit boring, dare I say. We didn't see any new decks. We kind of just saw the usual suspects with, a few pieces of tech thrown in here. It kind of made up for it in day 3. We had a very exciting top 8, even though it was red-white mirrors for the most part. We had LSV with the most epic pen trick we've ever seen. And it's kind of moments like these that, make everything so exciting. And it's a moment that you can only have in Magic. It is a uniquely Magic experience. You can't really pen trick someone in Hearthstone. You can't pen trick someone on Arena. But in paper Magic, you can definitely do it. And I don't know if it actually worked. Like, I don't know if Dazani was actually tricked, but he just might have not had any chance. He had to kind of just do it, but it certainly made for a very amusing moment, especially Twitch chat. Everyone's like, oh no, don't attack, and LSV like hamming it up there like a used car salesman. So very exciting. And I think that storyline of LSV trying to get his I think second Pro Tour win and with that settle the wreckage was a pretty crazy story.
Yeah, I mean, I had a blast watching. I enjoyed. I think it's really cool that we're seeing this growth from the influx of Arena with the newer players, especially since they've been spending all this time playing with Guilds of Ravnica on Arena, and now they can see like the cards and the decks that they've been played at the highest level. Viewership numbers were great. I think that with this particular Pro Tour being so far into like the legality of the set after the rotation, I'm not surprised that we didn't see anything very new, but I do feel like the kind of like metagame positioning in this particular format is really, really interesting, and I can't wait to kind of dive into that a little bit more. I can give or take the pen trick. It makes good TV. It's a bit of a spectacle. I think that anybody other than LSV doing it, like, may have looked a little disingenuous, but he hammed it up perfectly. And I really liked, like, in like one of the interviews with Gabby, who flew out there to be there for the top 8. She was just like, he tries to do that kind of thing in testing all the time, and like none of the guys fall for it because he's just like a big buffoon. But yeah, it was really fun to watch, and a little disheartening to see the last game of this epic tournament just kind of mulligan to 4. But what are you going to do?
Yeah. Oh, man. We got so many good topics to talk about. So for me, the Pro Tour, I did enjoy it. I'm someone who really likes seeing new decks. That's one of the most important things for me, is looking for new decks and just like interesting rogue decks. So on that front, I was a little bit disappointed, but the Pro Tour in some ways made up for it with some really amazing gameplay. There was an epic match with Kai where I don't even know how he won this game, where he just like was thinking so many turns ahead and was really impressive. There was an epic top deck with Finkel. Then there was LSV with the pen trick and his run through the top 8. So we got to see a lot of the like 5 best players in the history of Magic doing some really awesome things. So even though I was disappointed that we didn't get to see any rogue decks, or there was like no spicy, interesting decks whatsoever. There was a couple like Lich's Mastery decks that went out on day 1. If you look through the lists that got published, there's literally like nothing new. There's some innovations within the decks and tweaks within the decks, but no brand new decks or archetypes. But the gameplay itself really made up for it, and the storylines with LSV and some of these great players doing awesome things made it really entertaining. And actually, for some reason, I can't believe I'm saying these words, but the Boros mirrors were actually fairly entertaining games of Magic somehow. When I saw 6 Boros decks in the top 8, I was like, oh my god, I do not want to watch this on Sunday. Please no. But they actually led to some really close, interesting back and forth games. So it was way better than I imagined it would be when I saw the top 8 deck list.
Well, because it's just such a different gameplay dynamic than what we're used to, right? Like, if you look at the last standard format, like, do your decisions really matter when your opponent could just have, like, Curve into Hazoret or Scarab God and just win the game? Like, with these Boros mirrors and the Boros deck in general, like, all of your decisions matter. Whether you block early, attack early, how you sequence your lands, do you shock to get ahead on tempo, which creatures you play, like, all of your decisions matter, and there isn't like one like crucial point or one crucial like battle cruiser mythic that's just going to take over the game. Like, you have to play and outplay your opponent to win the game of Magic, as opposed to just like get lucky and draw the most powerful card. And it's really entertaining to watch.
Let's start by talking about some of the decks in the metagame, and then we can circle back around to some of the more big picture stuff like viewership and whatnot at the end. So we were just talking about Boros aggro or red-white aggro. There was Boros aggro and red-white aggro. Red-white aggro is basically a white weenie deck that's splashing for heroic reinforcements and some sideboard cards, and then Boros aggro is more of a mentor style deck with like Boros Challengers and Aurelias and more a traditional like Boros aggro style deck. So that's the difference there. I would say that Boros aggro, or now I'm confusing myself, red-white aggro was probably the breakout deck of the tournament. I mean, this was a deck that was known. I had seen it in the tournament results and people were kind of playing it on Magic Online, but I don't think it was really a top tier deck heading into the tournament. So what do you think about red-white aggro going out of the tournament? Is this the new top of the format? Is it the one of the top tier decks in standard, or was this just a good choice for the weekend? What do you guys think about that deck?
So there was a third white deck, which is the Channel Fireball white weenie deck, which decided to go white weenie and then play lifelink creatures and a Johnny's Pride Mate to kind of overpower their opponents in the mirror. And you saw LSV casting better than Tarmogoyf, right? Like 2 mana, 5/5, 6/6s and stuff like that, as a way to combat this. But going out of the Pro Tour, like, I don't think there's anything especially special about these white decks. As an arena player, we've all seen these decks before, and you kind of just get wrecked if people put sweepers and like Settle the Wreckage, any of the 3 mana 2 damage sweepers. And the beauty of all of this is people shied away from those cards. Like the control decks weren't playing them, the Golgari decks weren't playing them because they were trying to shore up their Golgari matchups, right? Where these cards are not as effective. And as a result, you have these kind of white weenie decks running rampant, right? But, give them back-to-back Deafening Clarions and they're kind of done for. So I suspect the metagame will shift back. It's not like this deck is super unbeatable. Maybe we see Chain Roller. If you notice, a lot of these lists just get totally wrecked by Chain Roller, but nobody was playing them. So I expect the metagame to shift back, add more sweepers in, maybe Chain Rollers, things like that. And this will just be kind of a good deck, right? You're not going to see this, 5 of 8 of the top 8 decks were white weenie. That was just an anomaly of the tournament. So I feel the metagame will shift back.
So there's actually 4 versions of this deck, because Andrew Ellenbogen's list didn't have heroic reinforcements, had some of the lifelink elements that the Channel Fireball list had, but he also had Venerated Loxodon. So there's this weird spread of the cards that you can play to try and attack things differently. And it just turned out that the Channel Fireball list with the more lifelink and being able to go tall and wide just lined up very well in the mirror. So for the actual format, even though there were 6 of these decks in the top 8, it wasn't the most dominating deck of the Pro Tour. If we look at the X1, X2, X2-1 lists, there are only a few of these red-white decks, but there's just a huge spread. Golgari Midrange, Jeskai Control, Izzet Drakes, so on and so forth. But all of these players that are in the top 8 did very, very well in Limited. So the standard format isn't a format where there's just one deck that dominates. The Pro Tour is a split format tournament, and so all these players 5-0-1, 6-0 in draft, and then 7-2-1, 8-2, 7-3 were their constructed records. So they weren't just dominating. I think ultimately what ended up happening and why a lot of these players decided to play the Boros style decks, which, looking at the metagame breakdown for the weekend, it was the second most popular deck, was because the Golgari decks going into the weekend were seen as the best, and there are the Steam Vent decks is what I like to refer to them as, Jeskai, Izzet, the Drake decks, are very good into the Golgari decks. They don't handle flyers very well. You can race them. And so a lot of people realized, okay, Golgari's good coming into this weekend. There's the potential for a lot of these Steam Vent decks that are going to try and prey on the Golgari decks. What beats the Steam Vent decks? These white weenie-based decks have good game against the Steam Vent decks. So that's why we see, there's not Tocatli Honor Guards in the main deck, like we were seeing on Magic Online a few weeks before the tournament. They're in the sideboard, and these decks are tuned to try and prey on the Steam Vent decks that were trying to prey on the Golgari deck. So it really is a next level sort of thing, which worked out for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think we saw a pretty good example in the top 8, actually, of just how miserable the Izzet Drakes matchup, which is the most popular of the Steam Vents decks this weekend, that just felt like a miserable matchup against white-red aggro. It felt like some builds were better than others. Yuya's build didn't have any fiery cannonades or any real sweepers, so it felt like a really rough matchup for him in specific. So it'll be interesting to see how things shake out moving forward. So we talked a little bit about Golgari. Golgari was the number 1 deck on day 1 of Guilds of Ravnica. It posted kind of medium numbers. It wasn't a bad deck. It wasn't a good deck. I think most of the metrics were slightly below the average deck in the field, maybe because it had a big target on its back and everyone was knowing that they needed to beat it. What do we think about Golgari now coming out of this tournament, where it didn't really put anyone into the top 8, kind of missed out on the really high-end finishes? Are we expecting that to remain one of the top-tier decks once we see this post-Pro Tour readjustment?
Well, if you ask Willie Adel, he thinks so. I mean, you can, because it's black-green good stuff, you can always tune your Golgari deck to beat whatever you want, right? The question is, can it beat enough of the field? And that's going to depend on what the rest of the field looks like. But I don't think Golgari's in that bad of a shape. I mean, the combo of, what's the 2-drop? the Wild Growth Walker.
Yeah.
Like, if there's too much aggro, you put the Wild Growth Walker in the Explore package in, right? Or, if you want to go bigger, you can go bigger towards the Planeswalkers and all your ETBs. Too many Tocatli, Honor Guards or whatever, just throw in more removal, more sweepers. So there's different ways to configure this deck. And I'm gonna guess, like, how many decks are preying on this. And it's usually the control decks that prey on this. And if the control decks are changing their removal suite to deal with White Weenie, then Golgari has a chance to overpower them. So it's going to be rock, paper, scissors to see where we end up. And I suspect that at the end of all this, we'll still have our kind of three main archetypes going still.
Well, so I look at it like this. Like, outside of Willie, I don't think that there were any Hall of Famers that were playing Golgari at this Pro Tour, which I think says a lot. Doesn't say that the deck's bad. I think that it falls in to this weird spot where, like, in a normal rock, paper, scissor, you can, like, kind of position yourself against one of the three angles, or, one of the other two angles. But this particular format, there's not just three decks. Like, you have Golgari and you have Jeskai on the two ends of the spectrum, where you have, like, mid-range, like, flexible, and then a control deck. But, like, the aggressive decks with, white-based or mono-red based, and then you have the Is It Drake deck, I think is the deck that kind of sits in this weird spot that makes Golgari have to play a weird game, because they're doing everything that you can't really handle. Like, the damage they can put out will outpace your Wild Growth Walker. They're focused on dealing damage in large chunks with their flyers, and that deck is very, very weak to flyers. And because of cards like Maximize Velocity, they can play this, like, weird control game and then kill you out of nowhere. So I think that the Golgari deck feels similar to, like, the Jund decks of old, where, like, one of the big strengths of, like, the Golgari based decks is you have, like, this good sideboard options with a lot of flexible cards, but there's not enough that hits all of the different angles that's going to be attacking you. And sometimes you're just going to have an off weekend. Like, if you prepare for, like, the mono red decks and the Drake decks and have a little bit of stuff for Jeskai, and then there's, like, a ton of people play Jeskai or a ton of people play the white decks, then you just kind of get crushed, and there just, like, isn't enough to spread amongst, like, the other four decks that you have to worry about in the format.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good breakdown. I think Golgari will still be fine. I think that the fears a couple of weeks ago, where it was just going to run away and be the best deck in the format, this Pro Tour pretty clearly shows that those fears were unfounded, where now the conversation is more like, how does this fit into the top tiers of the meta? Is it tier 1? Is it tier 2? Which is a big change from where we were a couple weeks ago, when some people were very concerned that it might just dominate the format. And that was one of the awesome parts about the Pro Tour in general, is it was very diverse. We saw the most played deck in the field was Golgari at 22%, and then I think we had 4 more decks that were between 10 and like 15%. So we have a lot of different playable archetypes, and it feels like it's been a long time that we've since we've had a standard Pro Tour with that level of diversity. So what do you think about the format moving forward from a broad perspective? Are you expecting that diversity of having a lot of different playable decks and no one deck that's 30-40% of the meta like we had been dealing with? Are you expecting that to remain over the next couple months as we move towards Ravnica Allegiance?
Yeah, to add to that, I just want to point out that even within the archetypes, we have so much diversity, right? Like, within the white weenie, white splash red, people haven't figured out what number of copies of what cards to play, how many Venerated Loxodon, should we play Heroic Reinforcements, things like that. Even in the Golgari decks, they all look pretty different. Like, are you running Karn? Are you running Explore? Like, it's all over the place.
The Golgari decks just look like random deck generators, like the list. Like,
I was going to say that.
Like, you just have, like, these 25, whatever awesome cards for the deck archetype, and then it just kind of spits out the numbers.
That's literally all the decks. It feels like you opened a booster box and you just took all your guild cards that are rares and mythics and, like, shoved them in a deck, and, like, you get these random decks. Like, none of the numbers are solidified. They're all over the place, which tells me, the cards are very powerful and people haven't figured it out even after 4 weeks of testing or whatever we're at right now. So I feel like you can kind of just build anything. Like, even within these archetypes, you can just slam together whatever cards you want. It seems like a reasonable choice.
Yeah, so a couple things to touch on. First, if you love Golgari and you're looking for hot tech, Willie Eddle's always working on it, but I actually would point people towards Autumn Burchett and Jadine Clomparens. They did a lot of work on their Golgari deck for this tournament. Autumn was like either top 16 or like 17th or 18th. Like she did very well with their deck. They had everything thought out. I expect Jadine will write an article about it. It will be over on SCG. Like they did a lot of good work. I think the defining card from this tournament is a Danto Vanguard. So like what happens moving forward is just going to be how the format kind of adapts itself to combat a Danto Vanguard. So all of these shock decks just get eaten up by it. But if you're prepared like Wilson Mock with, like Sealaways and Clarions, like I think that, that could end up being a very good deck moving forward with Jeskai. But I think that we're just going to have a ton of diversity. You can play basically whatever you want until Ravnica Allegiance comes out, and then all hell is going to break loose. Like once we get Gruul, Orzhov, Azorius, Simic, and Rakdos added into the mix, it is going to be crazy. Teferi is finally going to get the support of the Azorius Guild. I have my heart set on some awesome Gruul things coming along to go with the dinosaurs that we have left over from Ixalan. Things are going to be bonkers once we have the next set comes out. So relish what you have now because it's going to get shaken up even more in January.
And I think there are some pretty good answers to Adanto Vanguard that just weren't really seeing a ton of play. You have things like Moment of Craving is a really strong answer that I see a lot of the green-black decks at the Pro Tour are playing many cast downs in their sideboard, but not many Moment of Cravings. Golden Demise is another really good sweeper option if you're in the black colors. So it'll be interesting to see how people adjust to the threats of the format, and I'm really excited for the standard format. I wish there was more spice, but I think we're going to keep seeing a very diverse format going forward, and it's been a while since we could really say that coming out of a Pro Tour. Not only were we coming out of the Pro Tour without really knowing the best deck, like you guys were just talking about, we don't even know what the best deck build is of most of the top decks in the format. We don't know what the best Boros deck is, or the best build of Golgari. There's so much disagreement between these deck lists, so it's actually a really exciting time for Standard, even without seeing a lot of really off-the-walls decks coming into play. So before we... Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, one last thing. What are your thoughts on the stock of Goblin Chain Whirler? If you look at the lists as they came out of the Pro Tour, no one was respecting Goblin Chain Whirler. You have White Weenie, which has basically the entire deck is X1s until they can pump with Benelish Marshall. You have Llanowar Elf decks, right? You have Explore creatures that if they whiff, get wrecked by Chain Whirler. Is Chain Whirler poised for a comeback, or people are disrespecting it for a reason? This red deck is just not powerful enough to keep up with everyone.
So, yes, Chain Whirler can hit some of the Explore creatures if you whiff, but it's the red decks just get devoured by the Golgari decks. You can play Chain Whirler and try and prey on these White Weenie decks, but if people just decide to play, what the most popular deck was going into the tournament, you're just going to get devoured by the Golgari decks. It's such a tough matchup.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big challenges with Chain Whirler, and I'll be excited to see what happens with Chain Whirler after we get the rest of the Shocklands. I think right now, with the Shocklands we have, it's really hard. I would love to be able to sideboard in Chain Whirler out of the Is It Drake deck or something, but it's just so hard because of the triple mana cost. So I feel maybe once we get more Shocklands, we'll see Jund maybe develop where you can actually cast a Chain Whirler in a 3-color deck.
So Chain Whirler costs 3 mana, and you can get it back with the 3 mana portion of Gruesome Menagerie.
Ooh.
So much value. There's actually one other deck that we haven't talked about at all from this Pro Tour. Even though it didn't place in the top 8, there were still a handful of copies in the X1, X2 standard decks. The Mono Blue Tempo deck. That deck's also just very good and can win a game of Magic depending on what it draws, and it's very cheap, and the format is so wide open, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, the Mono Blue Tempo story is actually kind of interesting because it had a really bad day one, and I'm not really sure, it might be like the reverse of what you were talking about with Red White Aggro, where maybe its players did really poorly in Limited and led to a really bad conversion rate. But if you look at the overall numbers, it actually had an average performance despite losing a ton of players on day one that didn't even make the cut. So it feels like the deck is more competitive than you would think just looking at the really poor conversion rate.
Shout out to Michael Cochran, the lone rep of Dimir, with the Dimir control deck. Actually really cheap, 60 tickets or $260. The only Dimir deck. So Dimir is the guild that we haven't seen represented much. We see there's some Esper decks, but no pure Dimir decks except for the single Dimir control deck, leaning on Thief of Sanity, Hostage Taker, and Doom Whisperer.
So before we kind of transfer out of Pro Tour stuff, I wanted to ask you a couple of big picture questions. So first off, you mentioned viewership was pretty strong. We were up to 40K during most of the finals, got up almost to 50K at a peak during, I think, the very last match. So what are you attributing that to? Like, do you think that is Magic just doing well in general, since Standard is actually pretty well liked right now? Is it Magic Arena? Is it the fact that probably the single most popular Magic player in the entire world was making a run through the top 8 and on camera all weekend? What do you attribute those strong viewership numbers to?
100% Magic Arena. Like, in the weeks leading up to this, Wizards has been very aggressively sponsoring big collectible card game players, like, people that stream other games, and it would not be surprising to me that a few of them, went to watch your favorite streamer, and they say, oh, what is this Pro Tour thing? Lots of people are watching it. Oh, it's Magic at the highest level, and oh, what is this? They're playing with physical cards. This is strange, and they're just tuning in and watching. Because, there's nothing exciting about this Pro Tour. Like, if you didn't know a Pro Tour was happening, you wouldn't know to expect something, right? Like, Standard is kind of solved. It's been out for a while. There's nothing too crazy going on. So I think it's all the Arena players coming in, and I think it's actually pretty sweet that they get to see some of the pre-cons going into the finals. You're like, oh, a Johnny's Pride Mate. I have that on my account, right? Like, I can actually go try that out. So I think it was actually pretty cool, but 100% Arena. Like, you have to give me some pretty strong data to convince me otherwise.
So I think the vast majority of it is Arena, but also all the other things that you mentioned likely have an impact. Also, like, coverage was just awesome this weekend. A lot of the extra pieces they did, the like top 8 teams to watch piece that BDM was doing was perfect. I really liked how they had the round table with Corey Burkhart, Corey Baumeister, and I believe it was Javier Dominguez that was sat down with them, and they were all, just talking about stuff other than just like, what's your record in the Magic tournament. Like, it was really great to like get to listen to those guys talk and chat a little bit. The coverage itself also felt really good. Like, I could do without Riley Knight being as trendy and punny as he is, but like Cheon was on point, so good. I think he meshed really, really well with Marshall this time around as well. It was just, I don't know. It felt like it was more enjoyable to watch, and I think that in combination with getting the new eyes on it from Arena and making it something that's engaging and captivating to those new eyes is what kept them around.
So I think that Magic Arena is definitely a reasonably big size part of it. Although, if you go to the Arena subreddit and look at some of the posts for there's a post for LSV's Bluff, and some of the top voted posts on there make it sound like people do not watch paper tournaments. Like, oh my god, that perspective is so obnoxious. I have no clue what's going on. How can anyone watch this? So I think that while that's probably part of it, I think that it's also true that LSV is a part of it. I know from talking about it on Twitter, I had several people say, I watch Magic tournaments sometimes, not all that often, but then I heard that LSV was making a run, and I love LSV, so I tuned into this Pro Tour specifically because I love LSV so much.
Oh, yeah.
So while it's probably a big chunk attributable to Arena and just the general marketing, maybe more so than Arena in specific, but we have seen this big marketing push for Arena, which is advertising Magic in general as well. So I think that's a big part of it. But I think having a player like LSV make a run into the top 8, I think that's also a big reason why the numbers were so good.
I mean, hashtag pay the pros. I mean,
Yeah.
without a doubt, like, LSV hamming it up in that top 8 with Settle the Wreckage and everything, like, that will increase Magic's popularity by a lot, right? It increases the value and kind of puts forth the argument of why pros are important to this game, right? Yes, you will always have someone playing Magic, but when we have a big personality we want to watch, right? When they know how to play to the camera, right? They know what to say or what to do to make Twitch chat go crazy. It really just adds to the experience. And to touch on CVM's point with the roundtable, you can see WotC trying to focus on star building. That's what I saw in coverage this weekend. Like, not only the roundtable, but they always had a pro on at the desk for every segment. Like, Paulo was on, Reed Duke was obviously on. They just had all the people there to kind of bring their names to the forefront. And that's one of the criticisms that we had about WotC and star building. So we saw their efforts to on that front. What I didn't like was the technical issues this weekend. Like, I thought, we're in, like, I don't know, round 6, the audio is desynced, right? And I thought, it has to be my computer because it's been like this for 6 hours. How could it possibly be the real stream? And I asked Seth, like, hey, is your audio desynced? He's like, yeah. I'm like, are you serious? This thing has been desynced for like 6 hours? Like, we've done so many Pro Tours by now. I don't understand why they can't get that part right. Like, if it happens for the first match, okay. But like 6 hours into the event, I think you should have had it figured out by then. So it was a shame that a lot of the first-time viewers to Magic would see this. But I think WotC should take a look at the Magic Arena subreddit, right? Those are a lot of first-time viewers watching paper events, and they have a different perspective, right? I noticed that we use a lot of memes and kind of insider jokes and like even pen trick, people don't know what that means. Riley Knight was talking about healing salve and things like that, and a new Magic Arena player will have literally no idea what he's talking about. So while it's cool for us, I would have liked to see, I don't know, beginner friendly language used, like explaining more things. Like, I don't know that they explain Golgari. Yeah, I don't know that they explain Golgari at any point, but they should like really be hammering that in at every point to convert our new viewers into, lifelong Magic fans.
Yeah, I think there's like a really fine line there. I've seen some suggestions of having like a new player stream even that's designed specifically for new players. I think there's a fine line, and I thought actually that they focused on that more than normal with this Pro Tour, trying to explain things. Maybe there was still like too much jargon and stuff, but from my perspective, I thought that they did more than normally explain some of the more basic concepts that they wouldn't always explain in the past. But maybe I was just thinking that, and that wasn't actually how it worked out. But I do agree with new viewers potentially coming in. That is a good thing to focus on. Otherwise, last Pro Tour topic I wanted to ask you about. So we had this great Pro Tour. We've been talking about the decks, the viewership, all that stuff. The climax of the Pro Tour was basically a non-game. A game where, in Game 5 of the finals, LSV mulled to 4, and the odds of winning on a mull to 4 are 5% or something. It's basically like a miracle can happen. It does happen every once in a while, but basically it's a non-game of Magic. And this led to some conversations about should we do something about this? And I think this also kind of ties into Magic Arena, because you have these new players that are playing best of one on Arena, where they give you the best of two hands and try to do these things to like minimize the downside of mulligans. And that doesn't even include Hearthstone players who don't even have a concept of mana screw in their game that are maybe coming over to Arena. So what did you think of the ending of the Pro Tour? And do you put any weight in the conversation or calls for a change to the mulligan rules?
It's a feature, like not a bug. I don't know. Like, if you make it so that you can sculpt your opening hand better, it changes the whole dynamic of the game, right? It lets, combo decks combo easier. It lets aggro decks, play less lands. It like changes the whole part of Magic is building around this variance, and your deck design, kind of is baked into here. And, you could play the risky deck with a low number of lands and hope you get enough lands, and sometimes you just mulligan into Oblivion and you lose on the spot. And I don't know, I like the idea of more consistency, but it just changes the whole dynamic of the game. Like, I've heard things like, I think Seth, you suggested, if you mulligan twice, you get to scry one twice, and then et cetera, or I've heard of the Hearthstone style, choose some cards, keep them, pitch the rest. But they just changed the dynamic of the game, and I'm gonna say that WotC has probably tested these at some point, right? We had the Vancouver Mulligan rule come into effect. It's been a while now, but I assume at that point they looked at all these other Mulligan rules, but that's kind of Magic. Like, Mana Screw is a part of Magic, and playing lands and managing your lands is a part of Magic, so I don't know if we could remove that.
So, I agree. I think that it is a feature and not a bug, but it does feel bad to have, like, a game of this scale be decided by it. So, like, you could potentially have some type of thing where it's like, in Game 5 of the finals of a Pro Tour, then this is the rule, but, like, I don't like splintering or fragmenting it that much. One thing that's interesting is the Mulligan rules for the Player of the Year playoff was different than the normal Mulligan rules because they were all no sideboard games. So we could see something similar to that implemented at some point, where you get a free mulligan and then go into the normal mulligans. At the very least, just for standard. I don't think you could apply it to the rest of the game, but that's certainly something that could impact having things like this happen.
Yeah, I think, oh man, it's just so bad from a viewership perspective. I think that's like the letdown, is you have this exciting top 8 and it goes to Game 5 and everyone's hyped, and then it's like, oh, there's like not even a game of Magic to decide the Pro Tour. So I think that's the part that is disappointing. I also agree that Mana Screw and managing your resources and deck building, that is all an important part of Magic, and I wouldn't want to see that go away. So if there are any changes, I would like it to be very slight, and the Mulligan rule is one of the hardest rules to change, especially if your plan is to change it for all of Magic and not just standard or a specific format, because so many things that kind of make sense in the context of standard would just absolutely break things in Modern or Legacy. So I don't know. It's definitely a feel bad. I wouldn't mind seeing some sort of small change to minimize the drawback of multiple mulligans. I think the system we have now is pretty decent for Mull to 6. I think the Scry 1 has made mulliganing to 6 a lot more palatable, and you still have a chance to win a game when you Mull to 6. I think once you go to 5, though, or go to 4, your odds just drop so much, even with the Scry, that I wouldn't mind seeing a slight tweak to account for those exceptions. But I do agree that you can't just overhaul the entire thing without breaking things along the way, so...
Yeah, and best of 5 is supposed to be the answer, right? Because normally we play best of 3, and in the top 8 we move to best of 5 to reduce variance to account for these, non-games. So I don't know, is like best of 7 the next step? Like maybe the finals is best of 7, but any given Sunday, like if you go into a best of 50 against LSV, like you're never gonna win, right? So they want to keep it short so that anyone can win, right? Like that's kind of a feature of Magic as well, that you can sit down against LSV, and although he has a superior deck and he plays better than you, due to variance, you still have a chance of coming out on top, right?
I think, yeah, and it might just be a bit unlucky, because if LSV had, or either player had mulled to 4 in Game 2 of the finals, no one would be talking about it. So maybe it's just, like, unfortunate that happened on the very last game, so...
They need to stop the stream and restart it so that no one notices.
Also, like, reverse the roles. What if this happens to Andrew? Like, are people going to complain? Like, are people going to have the same reaction as it happened to, like, the Golden Child LSV? I don't think so.
That's a really interesting topic. I think it would not be as much of a conversation if it was reversed. Although, like, I remember this happening during Pro Tour Magic Origins, I believe, and I think it was Sigrist that mulled to 4 in Game 5 of the last match, and I remember saying something about it then too. So, but maybe Siggy is the same way. He's a well-known player, so maybe that's part of it. He's not LSV, but he is well-known. So I don't know. I think there would still be feel bads if it was either player, but I think the big outpouring of conversation about it probably has something to do with the fact it was LSV.
Yeah, it's just like the Kibler effect, right? Like, Kibler complains about Moto, it comes down for a week for the first time ever, and then they try and do some improvements for it. Like, it's...
Well,
so the LSV mulligan rule coming in. That's what's coming out of this Pro Tour.
If you're platinum, you get a free mulligan.
Oh, God. Bye. Going to Artifact now.
All right. Well, we got to wrap up our Pro Tour talk because we need to get to some fish mail, and we want to hit a couple other topics really quick. So, Chris, there was a big Magic Online announcement today. Can you walk us through the important things real quick?
Yeah, so it's kind of convoluted, but ultimately they're going to be getting rid of like the monthlies. They're going to have like bi-week-ish challenges that you can get you to the mocks, but they're adding competitive pauper tournaments. They're getting rid of the competitive 1v1 commander. They're implementing a new format point thing that you can accumulate and use to get into format challenges and format championships, and you can that like lead into the mocks and the Pro Tour. So for all of you Pauper and Legacy and Vintage enthusiasts out there, you can actually qualify for the Pro Tour by being very good at your tournament that you want to play in, or format that you want to play in. And they're also bringing the Mox Opens back. So there's going to be a ton of ways for you to get QPs, use QPs. They're adding in FPs as format points, and just basically making it so that there are a billion different ways that you can qualify for the Pro Tour that's not standard.
Yeah, so I think that is exactly right. And it's super exciting to think that Pauper players, Vintage players, all these older formats, that you could qualify for the Pro Tour through that, which is really cool. I think the other kind of takeaway from this, to tie things back around to Magic Arena, is at the end of that article, basically what they say is, these changes are designed to focus Magic Online on what it does best, which is older formats and chaos drafts and cubes drafts and eternal formats, and focusing on experiences and formats that you can't play anyplace else. So it says we will still be offering standard and draft, but basically what I took away from this announcement is we want you to play standard and draft on Magic Arena. We want you to play everything else on Magic Online. So reading into this, I think it goes back to what we've been saying is I don't really know if I expect older formats and chaos drafts and all these things to come to Arena, at least in the near future. So I feel like this is a sign that Wizards does really see the two clients as having very separate goals and purposes.
So one caveat to that. We had another piece of news this week, which was an announcement. And on December 6th at the Game Awards, the future of competitive Magic gaming is going to be revealed, whatever that means. And a lot of people are expecting it to be arena related. So I think on December 6th, we're going to understand what the digital front for Magic is going to look like for competitive gaming. So we'll see how the arena announcement shores up against the Moto announcement.
Speaking of competitive gaming, I saw, Seth, you tweeted something in the credit roll at the end of the Pro Tour. Elaine Chase is no longer like global branding person. She's now VP of competitive gaming and esports.
Ooh, actually, I think someone else tweeted that, but that is very interesting.
Oh, I thought it was you, but yeah, there's in the role like at the end there's like credits or whatever, and Elaine Chase is listed not as like global branding director or whatever she was before. She's now VP of competitive gaming and esports.
So, yeah, that's actually pretty exciting. And what I see, my prediction would be with this announcement is I fully expect that Wizards is going to announce some sort of standard focused, I don't know how they run tournaments. Maybe they're further along with having tournaments behind the scenes. Like right now, we don't have the infrastructure that's public, at least on Arena, to have tournaments. But I would not be surprised to see them announcing some sort of standard only Mox type thing tied to Magic Arena, assuming they have the infrastructure behind the scenes that we haven't seen yet. And then you'll have all these like eternal ways to qualify for big money tournaments in the Pro Tour through Magic Online, and have standard focused ways through Magic Arena. So that would be my prediction. That's just speculation, but that's what I would expect from that announcement personally.
I bet you they'll keep it all in Arena. I don't think you would funnel into the Pro Tour. because it would be super awkward to win, you know, the Mox equivalent of Magic Arena and then have to fork up $500 to buy a deck. So I think it'll be purely digital and it'll stay digital and you'll be the world Magic Arena champion or something like that. And then hopefully they don't do something weird like give all the Platinum Pros like a free buy into this thing or something like that. And hopefully it's something that, you know, everyone has to work just as hard for. Like no buys, no shortcuts in, but you got to grind your way in like everyone else.
You know they're gonna do it.
If they do that, like there'll be so much outrage, because all these new players don't know who the pros are, right? Like if you're like a grinder and LSV gets shoehorned in, you're like, well, I guess it's LSV, my hero, right? But if you're a new player, like who is this guy? Why is he taking my spot?
They will learn as they get stomped by Platinum Pros trying to qualify for something they have no chance at qualifying for. That's your introduction to the pro community. All right. We gotta move on and hit some fish mail. We're running a little bit long, so Richard, why don't you take us through some fish mail?
All right, if you have questions, send them to @mtggoldfish with the hashtag mtgfishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air. Alden B4610, is the end of Master Set a bad sign for Eternal formats? How can players most effectively push back against WotC and this egregious pricing as of late 2018? So the UMA pricing saga continues on. Is this a bad sign for Eternal formats? Or is this a good sign because they just reprinted everything?
I mean, you're getting support. Like, what more do you want? Like, you can't complain that you want reprints and then complain that they're too expensive.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing personally. We're getting a ton of much needed reprints, and they said there's going to be other reprint products. So I'm hopeful that the new products will be even better and maybe even cheaper than Master sets. Like some of our best reprint sets have been things like Battle Bond, Conspiracy type sets. So if we see more things like that with good reprints and more modern reprints in Standard, like we saw Scapeshift and Crucible of Worlds, I feel like it might be a good thing to not have Master sets in specific for a while.
So with Master sets going away, and I remember seeing, Seth, you actually tweeted something that I think is a really good idea, and hopefully it's something that like actually comes to fruition. But Master sets going away, you mentioned something about printing cards that would be modern.
Oh
legal.
Man,
but are new cards? How sick would that be?
That is my dream scenario, is instead of Master sets, we get sets that are like partly reprint sets, but partly new cards, or even old card, like Counterspell, things like that would be fine in Modern that can't go through Standard first. Oh, that would be a dream.
Or just like the old M-Set design philosophy, where like a percentage of them are always new cards, and they'll be Modern and Legacy legal, but not Standard legal.
That would
That'd
be so
cool.
sweet.
So like Battle Bond or something, but instead of for multiplayer, for Modern.
Yeah.
You know, like Modern Masters?
Like Modern Masters, oh no. Racto77, with the new Master set coming out, do you think we'll see an unbanning of something to help sell packs again? Not as big as last time, but something like Preordain or Ponder.
Nope.
I don't think there's any Jaces left, really. I guess Stoneforge, maybe. I don't think unbanning Preordain isn't going to really help sell packs in a meaningful way.
All right.
Yeah, I think if anything, we'll see something like Agent Strange get banned.
Oh, please.
Or will it be an Ultimate Masters?
Oh, we're going to find out.
Assault Priest. Can we get a yearly special where Richard plays a Modern League or even a challenge with Jund? I don't know if I want to subject you guys to that. That might not be good.
Also, to piggyback on the last question, now that I'm thinking about it, Mox Opal is not in this set. So if it does not get banned in the next update, the sky is literally the limit for the price on that card.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing missing. I think like 7 or something of the 10 most expensive cards were reprinted, and some of the ones missing were fetch lands, which will get reprinted eventually, but that's the big one that's missing.
Could be.
So
like they could just be rare in the set.
I think they've been confirmed out by the numbers crunch from what I've read, but don't quote me on that 100%.
All right, Kid Panama. Are you hopeful that Ravnica Allegiance will give us Dreadbore?
Yes.
Yeah, I would be down with Dreadbore reprint or something similar.
I mean, we have Vraska's Contempt. Like, kind of does the job.
It's not the same.
Hash Brown Monster. Just had my first child. Named him Jace. I'm finding it difficult to make it to my LGS. I have Arena, but I miss EDH and Modern playgroups. Is it worth buying into Moto? I'm afraid to spend money and have it become obsolete.
Well, based on the announcements today, it doesn't seem like Wizards is planning on stopping support for Magic Online in the near future. Modern is kind of expensive, but you can play casual Commander games for literally pennies on the dollar compared to paper. So if you want to play casual Commander, Moto is actually a really great place to do that if you can't get to your local game store.
In addition to that, the return on investment for Magic Online is way different than Arena. So the cards have real world value, and it's usually just a small percentage. So if you buy a Commander deck for say $100, play it for a couple of weeks, you're probably going to get between $60 and $80 out of that deck when you sell it back. So you're really just kind of renting the cards if you wanted to go that route. And there are actually even services like Mana Traders where you can just rent cards. So you pay X amount of dollars and you just build your deck, use it, play for a little bit, and then give the cards back and you're done. So there are other options that don't involve you just dumping a ton of money and then being out that money.
Yeah, and you can always just straight up borrow cards from friends if you have friends that play Magic Online. Or maybe you make some new friends playing EDH. I know I love EDH and Moto because things are so ridiculously cheap. Like, we build 20 ticket decks for Commander Clash, and they're really powerful when, it's common that we have decks that are like 20 ticks and then like $3,000 in paper. Right, so you get to play with a $3,000 deck, but for only $20 for Magic Online. So I would definitely check it out, especially given that you're interested in EDH and Modern.
And there are even places like Card Hoarder that give out free bot credit for a new player. So, if it's only going to be a handful of cents for you to get, your cards for a casual Commander deck, you might be able to just get them for free with that bot credit from Card Hoarder.
All right, next question. Random Dark Rider. One of my favorite against the odds is 34 Rhinos. In honor of our standard savior, Siege Rhino, if you could build a deck with 34 creature, what creature would it be?
Oh, man. I might go with, is it Vampire Sovereign? Is that the flying Siege Rhino that we currently have in Standard? Yes, it is. I think that's the closest you could get is Vampire Sovereign. It's basically a Siege Rhino that costs 1 more mana, so I think that's the way to go.
I would just play whatever creature has Ripple.
I would play 34 Tarmogoyfs, but wait, they would be 0/1s.
Yeah, you can have fetches.
All right, 1/2s. I've actually played games where I'm like six turns in, and the Tarmogoyf is like a 1/2, and I'm like, how is this possible? And without graveyard hate, right? It's just like, how did this happen?
I think the correct answer is probably just Goblin Guide.
That's probably true.
Oh, that's so much land value in drawing. Militia Bugler, what are your views on Solemn Simulacrum as a general value card in EDH? He has been a staple for a long time, but I find myself agreeing with the EDH Recast that he's been outclassed by newer value cards in non-red or white decks.
I still tend to always play Solemn, but I also tend to always play Panharmonicon, so I don't know if my vote counts.
Yeah, I think Solemn's just always good.
What is the argument for Solemn is bad? Solemn is so good. I need to listen to this cast to see what the arguments are, but I still slam Solemn in almost every single deck. It just ramps, blocks, draws a card, random artifact synergy. It just does everything. Echo CD. Have any Goldfish content creators narrated themselves playing a game with commentary, even though they weren't recording? Has anyone narrated themselves making a sandwich?
I don't think I've ever accidentally narrated myself when I wasn't recording.
Really? Never?
I mean, maybe I just do it so naturally that I'm doing it all the time and don't even realize it because I'm so used to talking over everything I do.
That's probably the case.
How many times have you accidentally hit the stream button when you meant to hit record, Seth?
Several. I once accidentally streamed half of a box opening that I thought I was recording before I realized that I was actually streaming.
All right. Last question. 11 Vicious. With outrageous prices, Wizards is asking for Ultimate Masters. I've seen many LGSs and major stores selling the boxes for pre-order at a reduced price. Do you think Wizards will respond to this? perhaps lowering the MSRP themselves, or just ignore it?
There's no way they're going to lower MSRP, but I think it's very true that the actual price of the box is mostly going to be determined by the value that's in the set. We've seen past master sets selling for like half of MSRP because there's just isn't that many valuable cards in it. So when it's all said and done, the actual price that you pay for a box is going to mostly depend on the value of the cards that are in the box.
Yeah. MSRP exists just in case it's needed, right? So like it's not a rule. So like the cost of the box is going to be based off of what's in it and what the cost is for LGSs to buy it from a distributor. So I mean, I don't think that like Wizards could set like the MSRP for this set could be, you know, $500, and the price is always just going to be based off of whatever the LGS pays for the box, combined with what's in it. So like knowing the MSRP kind of gives you an idea of like whereabouts most stores are going to be paying for the box. But you know, we're seeing the price is kind of steady in the $280 range right now. So like that's really not that much different than say Modern Masters 2.
Yeah.
And there's a decent chance if MSRP was $240 and the set really has so much value that it looks like it has.
It'd still be $280.
It would still be $280 because it has so much value in it. We saw that with some of the earliest Modern Master sets. So I think people are arguably a little too caught up over MSRP in this scenario, honestly.
Yeah, MSRP is mostly meaningless. We've seen this, you know, the original Modern Masters sold for way more than MSRP. We see this with Commander products. The good decks sell for a lot more usually than their listed price, and then the bad decks sell for a lot less. What it does tell you though is roughly how Wizards is pricing this, because usually the stores are buying it as a percentage of MSRP somewhere, plus or minus their distributor discounts. But roughly you can just tell that, oh, this is a more expensive product than a standard box. But the fact that stores are selling it for less than MSRP doesn't really mean much. It's just a guideline for them to help price it. So if you find a place that has a price that you're happy with, then, you know, just go ahead and buy it, right? Like it's up to your store to kind of price their products. So that's all our fish mail for this week. So thank you to everyone who sent them in. If you have any questions in the future, send them to @mtggoldfish with the hashtag mtgfishmail.
And I think that brings us to the end of episode 197 of the Goldfish Podcast. So Chris, Richard, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Spikes Academy for their support of the show. Check them out, spikesacademy.com, 10% off with the code Goldfish. So that's all for this week. Have a wonderful week, everyone. We will be back next week to talk some Ultimate Master spoilers. And this is the group signing out.